Hello, my friends. Rob Roselli coming to you once again on not Fox News, today being Thursday, March the 8th, 2017. And again, the website boxofsunglasses.com. That's one word. Twitter at Rob Roselli. Facebook, Rob Roselli1. Email, info at boxofsunglasses.com. And yesterday, March 8th, we had the so-called Women's March. Many women who already have all the rights they need. Not saying things are perfect, took the day off to protest not having rights or being oppressed. I'm still not quite sure what the overall point is. Be that as it may, I mean, who's at the focal point of this so-called Women's March? You know, of course, you had Madonna wanting to blow up the White House. You had this Palestinian terrorist woman, I think one was arrested in New York City, I can't remember her name, but advocating for the suicide bombing, using children as suicide bombers, which we shouldn't be so aghast at, as tonight's conversation will get into one of the focal point of the Women's March. Let's just face it, it's called the black genocide known as abortion, okay? And we'll get into that here in a couple of minutes, and the barbarity of the abortion, of what really goes on, okay? And just in case you're interested, if you want to see, I mean, there's a website out there called blackgenocide.org. I don't really have any affiliation with it. I'm just giving its name out here. You can go on there and you can read some of the testimonies. You can look at some of the photos, donate, this sort of thing, okay? Of course, it's not going to make it into the white-controlled liberal white press or the white-controlled liberal universities. Okay, they're more interested in snowflakes, gender rights, rights to an abortion, women's rights, but ripping a baby out of a womb, slicing its neck, chopping its feet off, and storing them in mason jars. Mother's Day Massacre were experimental abortions using razor blades. Okay, and this sort of thing that we're going to get into a little bit later on. Somehow they don't make the news cycles, okay? That's just the way it is in this, the exceptional nation, okay, the exceptional people known as the United States. I'm going to get to that in a few minutes. And don't forget, boxofsunglasses.com, my 3 books. Okay, our Illuminati-controlled criminal overlords right here. Okay, don't forget, we got this debt bomb ready to go off here on March 15th. Okay, the mathematical certainty of the death of the dollar and the Federal Reserve System. It's a system of perpetual debt. Okay, which on the surface is so stupid, but it's so pervasive and so widespread and talked about by so many people. This is in fact how, quote, they get away with it. Okay. They, of course, being the they embedded in the theory of evolution, or they live, in honor of John Carpenter's excellent movie of the same title. I'm a huge John Carpenter fan, in case I haven't made that point lately. Okay, and a Great Society of the Undead, that perhaps can be another topic. We can get into several shows on that alone, but have no doubt the word great is a signal from our criminal Illuminati abortion crazed, genocidal, eugenics-minded overlords in honor of their god Satan. Just go out and say it. That's what the word great really means. And I have the documentation for all of that, and we can get into that on another show. But one of the manifestations, one of the outlets, if you will, of that satanic control of the United States, and in fact the world, is the abortion industry in this country, as we will get into here in a few minutes. And also, pleased to meet you, okay, the Satan character running around world history and running around the earth. A conversation here, very enlightening, a quick read, okay, tries to present the insanity, the darkness that's unfolding before us, and tries to put it into a more palatable, understandable format. I mean, look, you can listen to all the conspiracy theorists you want. A lot of these guys I listen to, and I have great respect for their information and knowledge. But at the end of the day, you know, at the end of the article, the end of the YouTube video, or whatever, you just come to this conclusive way, something's bigger, something bigger is going on here, okay? Something much bigger, all right? Someone's controlling this mess, okay? And as I've stated, and I'll state it again, who really controls this mess is the Lord or the Prince of Darkness, Satan himself, okay? That's just the long and the short of it, okay? But we're not going to get into that too much tonight. We're going to look at one of the physical, in-your-face manifestation of this control in honor of the so-called women's movement, sponsored, for the most part, by Planned Parenthood, which means you and I funded it, because not only with public school teachers deciding to take the day off because I guess they're oppressed with their benefits and salary and 180-day work years and all this sort of thing. I'm not saying they have the easiest job in the world with public schools and all that. I don't want to get into that right now, but it's hard to imagine why they would need to take the day off to protest a lack of something when women in, say, Saudi Arabia, to whom their hero, Pharaoh Barry, if you remember, bowed to the king of Saudi Arabia. It's some kind of pathetic reverence back there, right, within his first few weeks as president. You know, where women are, their heads are chopped off, or they're punished, sent to prison for going outside without a man, driving, you know, alone, not wearing their headscarf, whatever it's called, and, you know, whatever. And, you know, I don't care how ignorant this sounds. I mean, I've read enough of ex-Muslims and people that have actually lived there to get the idea of what goes on, okay, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And if you recall, you had the 15 of the 19 9/11 terrorists from Saudi Arabia. So, of course, what is the Skull and Bones version 2 of the Bush family, Georgie W. Jr. go ahead and do? He goes ahead and, well, yeah, Saudi Arabia is mostly responsible for 9/11. Let's go bomb the hell out of Iraq. You know, makes perfect sense. 15 years later, we're still there screwing around. Okay, but anyway, again, not the point of tonight's show. And also the Un-American Genocidal Complex. Okay, this is the origins, okay, of the Negro Project, okay, which we know today is Planned Parenthood. Okay, and I've gone through that, and it's documented in that book. You know, basically describing Hitler was a subset. Okay, well, what are we calling it now? The Deep State, the CIA, this Vault 7, whatever. Look, that's fine. Nothing that is revealed is going to be shocking to, you know, most conspiracy theorists like yours truly. Okay, when I know for a fact, you know, 100 years ago they were creating Adolf Hitler, did create Adolf Hitler, let him loose on the world, and then when the war was over, took advantage of this Operation Paperclip, took all the experiments at the, you know, the Holocaust and the white supremacist experiments that came out of social Darwinism and the American liberal progressive movement of the early 1900s, you know, through some suckers, you know, the Nuremberg trials, okay, as you know, as a dog and pony show to the imbecile majority that we were going to get those evil Nazis, but took the best of them, like Joseph Mengele and others, and made them rocket scientists and, you know, researchers and researching biology and biological warfare and this sort of thing. That's Operation Paperclip. Werner von Braun, okay, was basically one of the main stalwarts of the of NASA. Okay, the American space program was a German rocket scientist and all these sorts of people. So Adolf Hitler was, you know, but again, he was child's play. Okay, he was when you compare him to the Georgia Guidestones, okay, which are calling for the deaths of 90% of the world's population, brought to us by Robert Christian. Remember, the rose plus the cross, the male plus the female, the Rosicrucians, the secret societies, okay, the Royal Society, the Round Table groups, the Council on Foreign Relations, up to Bilderberg, up to Skull and Bones, okay, the Bush family, a lot of it centered around this place, the United Nations building. The Rockefeller found the United Nations building. Okay, these things, you know, founded, etched in stone. I've seen it myself. Okay, March 22nd, 1980, March 22, okay, 322. You're starting to see the connections here. It's not a coincidence. Obamacare, that so-called debacle, pretty much signed into law right around March 22nd, 2010. 30 years to the day of the founding of the Georgia Guidestones. And of course, in the book of Luke, I want to say chapter 4 or 5, I don't remember the exact chapter, but it's in early chapters of Luke, Jesus starts his ministry at age 30. So, look, these parallels they're not a coincidence, okay? The numerology, the occultism, the in-your-face, okay? I'll just give it to you here, excuse me, there's my middle finger, okay, for our white criminal overlords and what they think of us, okay? The in-your-face aspect of this, great. Okay, the unfinished pyramid, the all-seeing eye, the dollar bill that's about to go the way of the Zimbabwe dollar, or whatever denomination they had in Zimbabwe, or the Weimar Republic, whatever they call the German mark, or whatever hyperinflation name, these, whatever it's called, when you hyperinflate away your currency as a way to paying your debt. It's kind of a cute trick. I mean, they call it quantitative easing. It's just a fancy name for money printing. So if you owe somebody money, you owe somebody $10, it's like you just get out a set of crayons and draw up a $10 bill and give it to them and say, here, it's really not that far off from what the United States government is doing. Of course, behind the facade of Harvard, Paul Krugman and like-minded douchebags at Harvard and the New York Times, with that facade, and of course the talking heads on Fox and MSNBC and these other places, hyping up the economy and talking about a bunch of nonsense. But the in-your-face aspect of this thing cannot be overlooked. Okay, it's not hidden. They call it the deep state. Yeah, okay, you got the CIA hacking thing, and an NSA and computers out in Nevada and computer banks. And look, that's all great, but for the most part, it's in your face with its middle finger in the air. Okay, the Matrix, whatever you want to call it. But and don't forget the three basic principles of this show. One is the Bible is the core of the conspiracy and the infallible Word of God, and really at the core of anything, the only really true book in the world. Okay, I mean, there's different variations of the Bible. I mean, the authorized King James Version, but let's just say that the Bible is the source of truth and the only truth. Okay, the only ultimate truth. Anything else is going to be written by a human, including yours truly, is going to be fallible and have mistakes and just not be perfect. Okay, but that's just the way it is. And the second principle, of course, is Israel, the national Israel. Okay, and I'm not anti-Zionist. I'm not one of these Jews who are responsible for everything type of people. But just from a strictly biblical standpoint, Israel is not God's chosen people. I don't know how stupid you can be to just read the New Testament, the plain text of the New Testament, the Apostle Paul, Peter, Jesus himself, okay, calling the Jews sons of the devil. How can you escape being condemned to hell? Your house is left to you desolate. This is Jesus talking to the Jews. I don't know how much clearer you can be, okay? And you still see these idiots on these so-called, Christian networks saying, contribute to Israel. Israel's God's chosen people. We have to stand with Israel. No, we don't, you idiots. We have to scurry like hell and save as many people from Mystery Babylon, which is the United States, that we can while there's still time. All right? We got enough problems of our own, as we're going to get into here in a couple minutes. We got enough sins of our own. All right? That we don't need to be worried about Israel and their problems. And I'm not saying they don't have problems, and I'm not belittling them or minimizing their problems. But we got bigger problems right here. Okay, and most of it in our case, most of it is self-induced. Okay, and in Israel's case, at least you can make the argument. Look, all those people that say, well, Israel's occupying territory and all this nonsense, which is kind of funny to me. A country the size of New Jersey, how it occupies territory from nations much larger than it, with 100 million people that'd rather see it thrown into the Mediterranean Sea, would have to really be explained to me. But be that as it may, just from a biblical standpoint, Israel's not. They're just not God's chosen people. I don't know how much clearer, again, the New Testament could be. You can just read it for yourself. Will there be a last generation of Jews that are saved? Yes. Were they regathered? Was it a divine providence event? Absolutely. Okay, that's in Ezekiel 36. But God says, I'm doing this, I'm regathering you to save my name. Nothing that you did, Israel. I mean, you had my only son killed. You made a deal with the devil, literally, in terms of Judas Iscariot, okay, which I believe is reflected in Proverbs chapter 7, but that's a story for another night, okay. But anyway, and he will reach down and supernaturally defend Israel at the very end. That I agree with, but as far as the United States is concerned, before the Mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 and 18, we got bigger problems to worry about, okay? And then the third principle, this kind of segues right into my third principle, is that the United States is the Mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 and 18. Of that, there's no doubt. Okay, we're going to discuss that a little bit tonight. But be that as it may, again, just the background, okay, from where this is going to go is the Un-American Genocidal Complex. Okay, this book available. It's one of the only 2 books that I sell. Okay, so if you want to support this, my efforts, and they're minimal. Okay, I don't sell survival gear. I don't sell this and that, and there's any number of sites you can get that stuff on. But anyway, that's the background builder of what we're going to discuss tonight. There's 2 books out there now in Philadelphia. Okay, a few years ago there was this so-called doctor. He happened to be black, and Kurt Gosnell. Okay, never made the press. WorldNet Daily was the only significant media outlet that reported on this. Maybe InfoWars covered it. I don't know. I don't remember. But I know WorldNet was one of the only ones that covered this. The United States so-called media was MIA, uninterested. Okay, and what this guy had to say. Now keep in mind, for those of you that are old enough to remember, if you go back to the early 90s, okay, when the first Bush, the obsession with Saddam Hussein and the Bush family, okay, remember the story, okay, you had this Syrian girl, so-called, who got on, in front of Congress and was crying, the alligator tears, saying Saddam Hussein was running through hospitals in Kuwait and killing babies and ripping them off incubators and all this sort of thing, and claims which turned out to be mostly, if not totally, fabricated, just lies, okay, she got up and lied. Turned out her father was, I don't remember the exact connections, but he had connections to some kind of PR firm that had connections to the Bush family, okay. So basically it was a bunch of BS. Let's just get right to it, okay. This 14-year-old girl, however old she was, got on national TV and started crying. Saddam Hussein's ripping babies off incubators, so I guess we better send over the better part of the United States military and kick his ass all the way back to Baghdad, kick him out of Kuwait, was a rallying cry. Now, if you go by that logic, Kurt Gosnell in Philadelphia, and we're going to read just some excerpts from 2 books that I got off Amazon. I have no affiliation with either one of these books, by the way. But anyway, I started reading them. So by the logic expressed by the Bush family, the Skull and Bones, the Bush Sr., okay, son of the Nazi war criminal Prescott Bush, okay, just basic, he's part of the Un-American Genocidal Complex, okay, Brown Brothers Harriman, was tied with Harriman Railroad interests, which along with the Rockefeller, Standard Oil, and the J.P. Morgan, and the Ford, and that whole crowd, was basically responsible for funding Adolf Hitler. He was the military-industrial backbone in World War II, was set up by rich American bankers. Okay, just like in World War I. Okay, the same people were making money off J.P. Morgan and the like, and the same people that gave us the Federal Reserve System, that gave us World War I, also gave us Adolf Hitler. And tied in with that crowd was Prescott Bush, father to, the so-called, Christian George Bush. Okay, George Bush the first. So basically we had to go in and carpet bomb Iraq because Saddam Hussein was ripping babies off of incubators. Now, with the Un-American Genocidal Complex related, Bush at the helm, That's exactly what we did. Now, with that logic, we should be ready to carpet bomb the city of Philadelphia. And I mean that literally. I'm not saying, bomb Philadelphia. I'm just saying with the logic or a lot of the emotional push, let's just call it, to go in and get Saddam Hussein and, for invading Kuwait, whether he had rights to that territory or not. I mean, who knows? I mean, that's not really the point of this broadcast right now. But the point is that a lot of the support, we'll call it, to go there and fight a war in the Middle East was Syrian Girl and, Saddam Hussein pulling babies off incubators. So what I'm going to read out of these two books, just a few excerpts, by that same logic, we should be ready to carpet bomb Philadelphia. We should go to war with Philadelphia, okay? And as an aside, remember the irony, okay? Remember the communist pedophile defending scumbags, okay, at the American Civil Liberties Union, who never saw a cross they didn't want to see taken down, has no problem advocating for the black genocide known as abortion, okay? Now, the ACLU and their ilk will get their comeuppance. They will get their due. They hate God, and God is going to accommodate them, as we've talked about on previous shows. I mean, you can get as mad and as you want at the American Civil Liberties Union and the like. Just as an aside, and I'm not saying I don't, but knowing their ultimate fate and where they're headed, when God exacts his revenge on these United States, just nothing getting mad. It's almost irrelevant. Okay, they will be destroyed, and they will be sent to the eternal damnation. Okay, which is basically an infinity of just darkness. Okay, we've discussed on the show. That's just what it is. Okay, I've discussed that on past shows. And by the way, there's a link to my YouTubes with descriptions on there, so you can go. I don't remember the particular show off the top of my head, but we talked about what hell really is. Okay, and it's not it's not the devil running around with a pitchfork and fireballs and sticking people and all this sort of thing. It's eternal darkness. Okay, it's Revelation 14. The smoke of their torments will arise forever and ever. So what that means is there's going to be the wrath of God at the end of time. Okay, when that's gone, when he's done, because God's not going to be angry forever. These people will be evicted, won't be allowed in heaven. So the only other place to go is eternal darkness. God will forget about them, as written in Jeremiah chapter 23 at the end. And that's it. You're just going to be left with nothing. That's for infinity. Okay, and that's all they're going to remember. But anyway, I don't want to go off on that tangent right now, but that's basically what that means in Revelation 14. So they won't be completely destroyed, but they'll have what they want. I mean, they hate God. They hate his rules. They don't want to. Okay, just like in 1 Samuel chapter 8, when the Israels rejected God, they wanted an earthly king, and God obliged them, but warned them and said, "This is what you want. I'll give it to you, but this is what's going to happen. You're going to be fighting wars. You're going to civil wars, and you're just going to be endless problems, corruption, public corruption, and that's everything that basically happened to them." Okay, except in this case, where that was more of a physical punishment, in this case, it's for all the marbles. Okay, but I'm going off on a tangent again. But anyway, you can go back on the site and go back and find a particular YouTube where I go into detail on that whole concept. Okay, but be that as it may, now this is the book called Blackout, introduction by Jonah Goldberg, the official grand jury report of First Judicial District of Pennsylvania. Now, basically, the basic background is this guy Gosnell was a women's rights advocate, abortion. Which I guess, you cut the feet off babies and put them in jars and keep them in your office, or put some body parts in a freezer and try to induce an abortion with razor blades. I guess that qualifies as human rights today in Twilight Zone America. But anyway, so that's the background of who Gosnell was. Now, nobody from the Pennsylvania Department of State or Health Department who was supposed to be overseeing these guys, even though they received numerous complaints and in fact deaths of some of the mothers, the poor mothers, that came in, mostly black, poor black mothers that were killed by this guy. So those black lives didn't matter. Nothing ever happened. Nobody ever made a move on this place. What happened was he was apparently selling, overprescribing prescription drugs, and it was actually a drug investigation that finally caught up to this guy. All right, so in other words, the government knew what was going on here, because abortion is, a woman's right, and it's such a politically charged, sacrosanct right, courtesy of the so-called women's movement, backed by the Ford Foundation and the Central Intelligence Agency, by the way. Parentheses. How about that for a story? Everybody's this Vault 7 and all the nonsense, and that's all great, spying on American people. But how about you follow the strings back to the so-called women's movement, and you find the CIA and the Ford Foundation, okay, and who was running the CIA, the Rockefellers, the Bushes, the un-American genocidal complex. So you can see the real purpose of the women's movement. It's not women, dopes, stupid college kids, and you miserable wenches, and in the so-called women's movement. You're controlled opposition from the Ford Foundation. Okay, you're designed to give us the black genocide known as abortion, and designed to hate men, because if you go destroy the family and this sort of thing, because if you read Orwell's 1984 and these kinds of people, destruction of the family, destruction of marriage, destruction of the emotional ties between men and women was all absolutely huge to Orwell's 1984. Okay, and that's the source of the women's movement. Like, I'm not saying women don't deserve rights, and of course that's how it, if it ever gets out, that's how it'll be portrayed. But that's whatever. I don't care. But anyway, but the point is it is the focal point of the so-called women's movement. Is people like this Dr. Gosnell giving him the right to operate. And that's the reason why he was allowed to keep going. Okay, so you may ask, how did the state not know about this guy, being that women were going in there and having their uteruses punctured, women going to the hospital, women literally dying on the so-called operating tables. Okay, ambulances. One woman died because they called the ambulance too late, and when they did get there, it took them 20 minutes because the hallways, the emergency exits were locked with no keys. There were literally baby body parts and boxes and all this dirt and filth all over the place. They couldn't even get this woman out. Okay, but we couldn't report this in the newspapers because then it would put abortion in a bad light. Abortion, which again, the source of abortion was Margaret Sanger, who wanted to eliminate black people because in her mind they were not even worthy of being institutionalized. They needed to be killed before they were even born. So she invented this. She brought abortion to the United States. I don't know what else I can add to that, but let's just read a little bit of these excerpts. Okay, so let's just see how Margaret Sanger's Negro Project is doing today. And I'm not even done with these books. Perhaps they'll be, but here's just here's a paragraph here. Most of these acts cannot be prosecuted because Gosnell destroyed the files. Among the relatively few cases that can be specifically documented, one was baby boy A. His 17-year-old mother was 17-year-old mother. Okay. Remember, most of these women were black, poor black women. Okay. His 17-year-old mother was almost 30 weeks pregnant, 7.5 months when labor was induced. An employee estimated his birth weight as approaching 6 pounds. He was breathing and moving when Dr. Gosnell severed his spine and put his body in a plastic shoebox for disposal. Okay, we're going to read. Okay, now speaking of Mystery Babylon, we're going to go Old Testament here in a few minutes. Read from Zephaniah chapter 1. But keep some of this in mind. Okay. So the baby was born alive. He was breathing and moving when Dr. Gosnell severed his spine and put the body in a plastic shoebox for disposal. I think that's called murder. All right. So you're starting to see that this line, Okay, this so-called women's march, this line between murder and a so-called women's right to choose is very, very thin. That doesn't exist, but let's just forget all that for a second and just imagine what we're talking about here. Is the guy, should this be a case of murder or should it be a case of medical malpractice? Another baby boy B, now that was A, whose body was found at the clinic frozen in a 1-gallon spring water bottle, was at least 28 weeks of gestational age when he was killed. Baby C was moving and breathing for 20 minutes, okay, before an assistant came in and cut the spinal cord, just the way she had seen Gosnell do it so many times. And these were not even the worst cases, okay? So that's just from section 1 overview, okay, in this book, and I'm only probably about a quarter of the way done with it. But so a baby born alive, okay, and cutting its spinal cord, like in so many cases. Now that to me sounds a lot worse than pulling a baby off an incubator, if you had to compare. Okay, so this is why I'm saying, you know, by the logic of Gulf War I with the, you know, the son of the Nazi, Prescott Bush, the un-American genocidal complex, at the helm. I mean, by that logic, we should be ready to carpet bomb Philadelphia because, you know, of course, Gosnell lived, or his practice, so-called practice, was in Philadelphia. Okay. Now Gosnell, here's another one here, this untold story of America's most prolific serial killer. Okay. And McElhaney, Phelan, McClear, okay, just called Gosnell. Okay, we can just read a little bit in here, and again, this is another one I'm not quite halfway done with. There's a few experts here. Now here's something here. Okay, apparently this guy had some kind of turtles, pet turtles, in this abortion clinic. Okay, where he had, you know, babies, collection of aborted baby feet, and, you know, babies in boxes and spring water bottles and all this sort of thing, and spinal cords being ripped, and women's, you know, trying to give women abortions with razor blades. But so they were more worried. There's a turtle tank in the window, and Gosnell spent more time asking me about those turtles than he did asking me about anything else. The turtles, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. There was dirt. There was dirt all over the building, all over the place. It was filthy. We're throwing babies out in the trash, but oh, we care about those turtles. We're throwing babies out in the trash, but we care about those turtles. Does that sound like the animal rights movement? If you tried a quarter of the stuff that they do in these abortion clinics, could you imagine trying to, you know, aborting some kind of animal or an endangered species? Okay, there's Romans chapter 1, ring a bell. Okay, worshiping the created instead of the creator, professing themselves wise, they became fools. If you read Romans chapter 1, you can read up on all that. Okay, now here's another little expert. Williams also described the horrific murder of another baby D. Okay, now we had A, B, and C. I'm not sure this is connected to the, most likely is it's talking about the same case. We just read about babies A, B, and C. Remember, C, you know, one was born alive and what was it? His neck was, or his spine was severed and thrown in a plastic shoebox. Another one ended up frozen in a gallon jug of spring water. Okay, now here's D. Williams also described the horrific murder of another baby D, born in the toilet, who struggled and moved its arms as she killed it. The baby precipitated into the toilet. I took it out of the toilet and put it into a bowl, and I used surgical scissors to cut the back of the baby's neck, just like Dr. Gosnell showed me to do. Before I cut the neck, I saw the baby's arms moving. This is when I took it from the toilet and put it in the bowl, and then I went to put it in a milk jug to take it upstairs. Before I put it. We're talking about a live baby here. Before I put it in the milk jug, I saw the arm moving, and that's when I cut the back of the neck, she said. And she would plead guilty to third-degree murder in the death of another fetus, baby C. So I think this is the same baby C who was breathing outside the womb and moving its arms about 20 minutes before she snipped its neck with scissors, as she had seen her boss to do. Weston and Williams were exactly the type of employees Gosnell liked. People who were desperate for a job or just plain desperate, paid $8 to $10 an hour in cash and bonuses of up to $30 for every abortion they assisted with. The money added up fast. Okay. Those are just excerpts. Okay. So you had babies literally being precipitated in a toilet. It means they were just, the woman, I guess, was pregnant. She just dropped the baby right in the toilet. They picked the baby out of the toilet. They didn't flush it. I guess that would have clogged the toilet, so they pulled it out, still breathing, snipped its neck. So there's your abortion movement. There's your women's rights. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we sit here and we criticize this guy here, Adolf Hitler, about the Holocaust. German soldiers were tossing babies in the air and using them as target practice, and Saddam Hussein, which wasn't true, by the way, in Saddam's case, pulling babies off incubators. And we have the audacity to call ourselves the exceptional people and act as the world's policemen, call ourselves the richest nation on earth, and we're in debt, unfunded liabilities to the tune of $100 trillion to $200 trillion. Okay. A third world infrastructure which is literally crumbling before our eyes. But we have millions to spend on Planned Parenthood. So maybe we'll just conclude tonight with a reading from Zephaniah chapter 1. The word of the Lord which came unto Zephaniah, son of Cushi, son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, son of Amon, king of Judah. I will utterly consume all things from off the land. And this is Zephaniah chapter 1, okay, in the Old Testament. The great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hasteth greatly. Even the voice of the day of the Lord, the mighty man shall cry there bitterly. That is a day of wrath, a day of trouble, of distress, a day of wastedness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Okay, now this is the wrath of God, which is temporary. Okay, well, it's temporary in its tenure. Okay, but for the people that are going to be the subjects of it, like so-called Doctor Kurt Gosnell, Margaret Sanger, Queen Jezebel, Hillary Clinton, it's not going to be temporary, because the smoke of their torment is going to rise forever. Barack Obama, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, David Rockefeller, okay, George Soros, American Civil Liberties Union, okay. So, and I will bring distress upon them, that they shall walk like blind men, because they have sinned against the Lord. Now here, this is interesting, okay, and I believe this ties into various passages in the Bible. I mentioned Proverbs chapter 7 before, and we can get into that and perhaps in a show or two. This ties in with Revelation, okay, I believe it's God looking at Mystery Babylon. He's looking at the United States, okay, a nation formed in the Declaration of Independence, by the way, with firm reliance on divine providence. Okay, now the communist, pedophile, abortion-defending, separation of church and state scumbags at the American Civil Liberties Union will tell you that the Founding Fathers believed in a wall of separation between church and state, and divine providence is written in a concluding paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Go figure. But anyway, just what I'm getting at is that the United States will be severely punished, and I believe a lot of this language, the more I read this, and the more I read about what Margaret Sanger's Negro Project, the genocide, let's just call it what it is. It's a genocide. It's a Holocaust on a par, if not surpassing the so-called Holocaust of Adolf Hitler. Okay, and I'll say that now. And I will bring distress upon men, and they shall walk like bondmen, because they have sinned against the Lord. Now this is very interesting. And their blood shall be poured out as dust, and their flesh as the dung. Now, did we not just read similar language, okay, out of the two books I just read from, okay? We're throwing live babies out like dung and like dust. This is almost like God's wrath. This is centered on Mystery Babylon or the United States. This conclusion here is also interesting too. You know, this is for all the international bankers, the George Soros and the David Rockefellers and the Rothschilds of the world, who fund all this stuff, by the way. Okay, who gave us Adolf Hitler, who gave us Planned Parenthood, who gave us the so-called women's movement, the CIA, the deep state, whatever you want to call it. Okay, I mean, do we really need this Vault 7? I guess there's some information in there that's explosive, whatever they want to call it, but I don't know. I mean, is flushing a baby down a toilet, to me, that's pretty explosive. But anyway, neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath, but the whole land shall be devoured by the fire of jealousy, for he shall make even a speedy riddance of them all that dwell in the land. So that's Revelation 6 seal kind of stuff, right in there in Zephaniah chapter 1. And I believe that when you really read about what abortion, and you go back to the population control zealots and the people that think the earth needs the blood, just like the human sacrifice of the ancient Canaanites, the Druids, okay, the Mayans, the Aztecs, okay, we all sit there, they were into human sacrifice. And what do you think abortion is? Okay, it's a thinly veiled, population control measure to save Gaia or Mother Earth. It's multi-purpose, and of course, it gets rid of the less evolved savages or Negroes. Okay, and I'm quoting directly from Darwin and Margaret Sanger. Okay, so for all the idiots out there, the social justice warriors who are calling Trump a Nazi, I suggest you read up on your public education compatriots, okay, who forced Darwin and Margaret Sanger down our throats. Maybe go read and see what they were saying. Black Lives Matter people and all that sort of thing. But anyway, I believe this language is directly related to Mystery Babylon or the United States. Okay, that's just the way it is. So we'll kind of end it there. I don't know how else I could end it. Rob Roselli, boxofsunglasses.com. Good night and God bless.